The morning sun spilled gold across the marble steps of Jefferson County Courthouse, promising nothing more than another routine Tuesday. But fate, as always, had other plans. Officer Daniel Martinez strode up the steps, his uniform crisp, badge gleaming, and posture radiating the self-assurance of a man who believed in the power of authority. His boots echoed sharply, each step a declaration. At 28, Martinez was still young enough to accept that the world fit neatly into rules and uniforms. That respect was something to be commanded, not earned. Near the entrance, an elderly black man stood quietly. He wore a simple gray suit, threadbare at the cuffs, but pressed with care. His silver hair was immaculate, his back ramrod straight, and his hands rested on a battered leather briefcase that whispered of decades of use. He looked utterly unbothered by the courthouse bustle, as if he'd stood on those steps 1,000 times before. Martinez barely noticed him at first. But then, something about the man's calm, dignified presence caught his eye. In Martinez's world, people waiting at courthouse doors were supposed to look anxious, deferential, maybe even apologetic. This older man looked like he belonged, and that, somehow, rubbed Martinez the wrong way. He squared his shoulders and approached, letting his voice ring out with that unmistakable cop cadence. "Sir, what are you doing here?" The man turned, meeting Martinez's gaze. His eyes were steady, unflinching, a quiet defiance in their depth. "Just waiting to go inside, officer," he replied, voice soft but unwavering. Martinez felt a twinge of irritation. "No apology, no nervous fidgeting, just calm. This area's for court personnel and attorneys only," he said, his tone sharpening. "You can't just loiter around the entrance. I'll need you to wait outside." A flicker passed across the older man's face. Something like amusement, maybe pity, but gone in an instant. "I have every right to be here," he said, his words measured, almost gentle. Martinez bristled. "Look, sir, I'm not going to ask again. If you don't have business here, you need to move along." By now, the courthouse crowd had begun to take notice. A young woman in a navy suit slowed her pace, pretending to check her phone, but really watching. An older white man in a tailored jacket paused halfway up the steps, eyes narrowing. The air thickened with the unspoken tension of a scene everyone recognized, yet wished they didn't. The older man didn't flinch. "I do have business here, officer," he said. Martinez, feeling the pressure of onlookers and the heat of his own assumptions, doubled down. "Then you can explain your business to security, outside. Away from the main entrance." A gasp fluttered through the crowd. The older man regarded Martinez for a long, silent moment, a gaze that seemed to see right through the young officer's badge and bravado. He nodded ever so slightly. "Very well, officer, if that's what you think is best." He turned, walking with slow, deliberate steps toward the edge of the courtyard, briefcase swinging gently at his side. Martinez watched him go, a fleeting sense of victory rising in his chest. Authority maintained, order restored, but the crowd wasn't so sure. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. A few reached for their phones, recording the moment, a moment that felt wrong in ways they couldn't yet articulate, but would soon become painfully clear. Martinez, meanwhile, returned to his post, oblivious to the storm he'd just set in motion. The courthouse doors loomed behind him. But the real drama was only beginning. He had no idea that he'd just ordered one of the state's most esteemed judges to wait outside his own courthouse. He had no idea that this quiet, dignified man had spent a lifetime fighting for justice in those very halls. He had no idea that in mere minutes, his world and his understanding of respect would be turned upside down. The crowd waited, breath held, for what would happen next. Long before he stood on courthouse steps, Samuel Washington was just a boy in the red dirt heart of Alabama, a place where the rules were written in skin and silence, and justice was a word whispered, not spoken. He was born in 1943, in a shotgun house at the edge of Montgomery. His earliest memories were of his mother's hands, calloused from scrubbing white folks' laundry, yet gentle as she braided his hair by candlelight. His father, a railroad porter, left before sunrise and returned long after dusk, always wearing a pressed cap and a tired smile. Poverty wasn't just a fact of life. It was the air they breathed. Samuel learned early that the world did not expect much from boys who looked like him. The colored school was 3 miles away, and the books, hand-me-downs from the white school, were tattered and marked with names that weren't his. But Samuel devoured every page, reading by kerosene lamp, his mind hungry for worlds beyond his own. He saw the world's ugliness up close, the whites-only signs, the bus driver who sneered, the neighbors who vanished after dark. But he also saw quiet acts of defiance. His mother slipping extra bread to a struggling neighbor, his teacher refusing to let the children recite the pledge under a torn flag. Samuel learned that dignity was not something anyone could take. It was something you carried, no matter how heavy. At 16, he watched the world change. Rosa Parks sat down, and the city erupted. Samuel joined the marches, his feet blistered but his spirit unbroken. He saw Dr. King speak, his voice ringing like thunder. And for the first time, Samuel believed he could be more than what the world expected. He won a scholarship to Howard University, packing his dreams into a battered suitcase. Washington, D.C. was a revelation. Black professors, lawyers, and judges who walked with heads held high. Samuel studied law with a ferocity born of hunger and hope. He worked nights at a diner, studied through exhaustion, and graduated top of his class. Returning to Alabama, Samuel became a civil rights lawyer. He fought for the voiceless, sharecroppers cheated out of wages, families evicted at a whim, children denied education. He took on cases no one else would, his reputation growing with every hard-won victory. He was relentless in the courtroom, but never cruel. His opponents respected him, even as he dismantled their arguments. His landmark case came in 1978, when he defended a group of black farmers facing illegal foreclosure. Samuel's closing argument, delivered with quiet fire, brought the courtroom to tears. The judge ruled in their favor, and Samuel's name became legendary in legal circles. Yet for all his triumphs, Samuel remained humble. He drove the same old Buick for 20 years. He returned to the same church every Sunday, sitting in the back pew, head bowed. He mentored young lawyers, teaching them that justice was not just a profession, but a calling. By the time he was appointed to the bench, Samuel Washington was more than a lawyer. He was a symbol. His courtroom was a place where everyone, regardless of color or coin, stood on equal ground. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people listened. Stories about Judge Washington became courthouse folklore. How he once paid a defendant's bail from his own pocket. How he'd pause proceedings to comfort a crying child. How he'd stare down the most arrogant attorneys with nothing but a raised eyebrow, yet he never forgot where he came from. On the anniversary of his mother's passing, he'd visit the old neighborhood, slipping quietly into the church kitchen to help serve meals. The children there called him Judge Sam, not out of fear, but affection. And through it all, he carried himself with a quiet dignity. This dignity could not be diminished by disrespect, nor inflated by praise. He had seen the worst of the world and chosen, again and again, to answer with grace. Now, as he stood on those courthouse steps, briefcase in hand, Samuel Washington was not just an older man waiting to be led inside. He was the living memory of every struggle, every march, every hard-won victory. He was the embodiment of justice, patient, unyielding, and quietly powerful. The question lingering in the air wasn't just about who he was, but how his history, his battles, and his unbreakable spirit would shape what happened next. Now let's step into the mind of Officer Daniel Martinez, not to justify his actions, but to understand the invisible machinery at work in a single fateful moment. Martinez wasn't born with suspicion in his heart. He entered law enforcement fresh from the academy with a sense of purpose, driven by the idea that he could be a force for good. His mother, a nurse, often reminded him that respect was earned, not demanded. Yet, as the months wore on, the world he'd stepped into began to gnaw away at those early ideals. The Jefferson County Police Department had become a crucible of controversy. Headlines blaring accusations of racial profiling, officers suspended, community trust shattered. Every time Martinez zipped up his uniform, he felt the weight of that scrutiny. He'd grown cautious, defensive, sometimes even resentful, as if the badge was both shield and target. Pressure does strange things to the human mind. When the world feels hostile, we search for certainty, for patterns that help us navigate the chaos. Martinez's training drilled urgency into his bones. Hesitation could mean danger, authority must be asserted, protocol was king. But beneath that training there were other lessons, unspoken and insidious. Who looked out of place, who might be trouble, who belonged, and who didn't. These weren't rules he'd chosen, but they shaped his instincts all the same. And so, when he saw an older black man standing quietly by the courthouse entrance, those instincts flickered to life. He didn't see Judge Samuel Washington. He saw a potential disruption, someone to be managed, not understood. It's a jarring truth. The very skills meant to protect can sometimes close our eyes to the humanity right in front of us. Martinez's mind raced through its mental checklist: courthouse security, recent threats, the department's battered reputation. He saw the judge's calm, composed demeanor and misread it as defiance. He heard a soft, unwavering voice and mistook it for insolence. In that split second, Martinez wasn't thinking about justice or fairness. He was thinking about control, about not letting another situation spiral, about proving to himself and his superiors that he could handle whatever came his way. But what he didn't realize, and what you, as the observer, can feel so keenly, is the deep current of irony running beneath this encounter. Martinez was standing just steps away from the very halls where Judge Washington had spent a lifetime championing the rights of the overlooked and unheard. The officer's authority was borrowed, conferred by badge and uniform. The judge's was earned, built from decades of wisdom, restraint, and moral courage. Yet in that moment, Martinez's world shrank to a single narrative: enforce the rules, maintain order, don't let your guard down. The tragedy here isn't just in the mistake, it's in the ordinariness of it. Martinez wasn't a villain. He was a young man under pressure, shaped by a system that rewarded quick judgments and discouraged vulnerability. He was, in many ways, every one of us when we act on autopilot, letting bias and fear steer our decisions. The contrast between Martinez and Judge Washington is stark, but it's also instructive. One man's power was fragile, easily threatened. The other's was unshakable, rooted in principle and experience. Ask yourself, how often do we fall into the same trap? How often do we let stereotypes dictate our actions, especially when stress is high and time is short? Martinez's fatal assumption didn't come from hatred. It came from a failure to pause, to question, to see the individual instead of the category. That's the real danger of unchecked bias. It turns moments of connection into moments of conflict, and it closes our eyes to the stories, struggles, and strengths of those we encounter. As Martinez watched the older man walk away, he felt a fleeting sense of victory, as if he'd done his duty. But beneath that, a subtle unease began to stir, a sense that something important had just slipped through his fingers. He couldn't name it, not yet. Soon, though, he would learn that proper authority isn't about commanding obedience. It's about recognizing dignity, even when it's quiet, even when it challenges your assumptions. And in the end, the lesson waiting for Martinez would be far more profound than any he'd received in the academy. A lesson about humility, respect, and the cost of seeing with narrowed eyes. Dramatic irony lingers, because you know what Martinez doesn't: that his moment of control is about to unravel, that the man he dismissed is the very embodiment of the justice he claims to serve. This isn't just one officer's story. It's a mirror asking us all to look closer at the assumptions we carry and the power we wield, often without even realizing it. The air outside the courthouse thickens, charged with a tension so palpable that even the pigeons scatter from the steps. Officer Martinez stands rigid, jaw tight, his hand resting just above the holster, not out of necessity but out of habit, a silent assertion of authority. The older man, Judge Samuel Washington, remains exactly where he was told to wait, posture unbowed, eyes fixed on the middle distance. Around them, the world seems to slow, as if everyone senses the invisible line that's just been crossed. Martinez's voice cuts through the murmurs. louder now, edged with the frustration of a man who feels his grip on the moment slipping. "Sir, I already asked you to move away from the entrance. You're obstructing the flow of people. I need you to cooperate." There's a brittle urgency to his words, the kind that comes from being watched. And they are being watched by the courthouse regulars, by the young woman in the navy suit who now stands frozen mid-step, by the security guard inside the glass doors who hesitates, uncertain whether to intervene. Judge Washington turns, meeting Martinez's eyes. His face is calm, almost serene, but there's a quiet strength in his gaze, a silent challenge, an invitation to see him as more than just a problem to be managed. "Officer, I am not obstructing anyone," he replies, voice steady, resonant with a dignity that draws the attention of even the most hurried passer-by. "I am simply waiting for the building to open to the public. That is my right." The officer's fingers drum restlessly on his belt, betraying nerves he wishes he could hide. He glances at the growing cluster of onlookers, feeling the weight of their silent judgment. Every second that passes, the crowd grows bolder, phones lifted, eyes narrowed, the first whispers of injustice rippling through the morning air. Martinez senses the shift, the way the balance of power in this small patch of sidewalk is teetering, and it unnerves him. "Sir, I don't want to ask you again," Martinez insists, his tone clipped, the words tumbling out faster than he intends. "If you don't comply, I'll have to call for backup." "Please, step aside." There's a plea buried under the command, a hope that the older man will yield, that this uncomfortable spotlight will move on to someone else. But Judge Washington doesn't move. He stands his ground, not with aggression, but with a patience that seems to absorb the officer's agitation. "Officer, I assure you I have business here. Perhaps if you ask my name, you'd understand." His words hang in the air, an olive branch and a test all at once. Martinez hesitates, caught off guard by the suggestion. He's used to people shrinking under pressure, not meeting it with composure. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickers across his face. Should he ask? Should he reconsider? But the moment passes and pride wins out. "Sir, your name isn't relevant right now. Rules are rules. I can't make exceptions." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Someone mutters, "This isn't right." And another, "He's not doing anything." The tension is no longer just between two men. It's become a public reckoning. The bystanders sense the injustice, their own memories of being dismissed or overlooked rising to the surface. Some record the confrontation, others watch, hearts pounding, waiting for the inevitable escalation. Judge Washington's hands remain at his sides, fingers relaxed, his briefcase resting gently against his leg. He breathes deeply, as if drawing strength from the earth beneath him. "Officer, I respect your position," he says, voice gentle but firm. "But I will not be moved unless you have a lawful reason. This is my courthouse as much as yours." Martinez feels the ground shifting beneath him. His training tells him that compliance is paramount, that hesitation is weakness. But something about the older man's calm, the unwavering certainty in his voice, rattles him. He glances toward the courthouse doors, hoping for support, for someone in authority to step in and validate his approach. But the security guard inside watches, conflicted, unwilling to take sides. The crowd grows restless. A young man in a hoodie steps forward, camera rolling, eyes narrowed in indignation. "Why are you bothering him, officer?" he calls out, his voice echoing off the stone columns. "He's not hurting anyone." Others nod in agreement, their presence a shield and a threat all at once. The energy shifts from passive observation to collective resistance. Martinez's pulse quickens. He feels the eyes of the world on him, not just the crowd, but the invisible gaze of his superiors, the press, the public. Every decision is a test, every word a potential headline. He doubles down, voice rising. "Sir, this is your last warning. If you don't move, I'll be forced to detain you for obstructing justice." The threat hangs in the air, heavy and absurd. The crowd recoils, some gasping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Judge Washington's eyes narrow, not in anger, but in disappointment. A silent rebuke that cuts deeper than any shouted accusation. "Obstructing justice?" he repeats softly, as if tasting the irony of the words. "Officer, do you know what justice looks like? For a moment, time seems to stop. The question lingers, unanswered, a mirror held up to Martinez and to everyone watching. What does justice look like? Is it the rigid enforcement of rules or the recognition of humanity in each encounter? The crowd leans in, breath held, sensing that something profound is about to unfold. Martinez falters, caught between the script he's been given and the reality before him. He sees the older man not as an obstacle, but as a person. Someone who refuses to be diminished, who stands with the quiet confidence of a man who has weathered storms far fiercer than this. The officer's anger drains, replaced by confusion, vulnerability, and a dawning awareness that he may be on the wrong side of this moment. But pride is a stubborn companion. Martinez shakes his head, clinging to the only certainty he has left. Procedure. Sir, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm just doing my job. Judge Washington nods, a trace of sadness in his smile. I know, son. But sometimes doing your job means more than following orders. Sometimes it means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. The crowd is silent now, the tension stretched to its breaking point. Every eye is fixed on the two men, one clinging to authority, the other embodying it. The contrast is stark, the stakes undeniable. In this moment, everyone feels the injustice, the imbalance, the deep longing for resolution. A distant siren wails, growing louder, a reminder that time is running out. Martinez glances nervously over his shoulder, wondering if backup will vindicate him or expose his error. Judge Washington stands unflinching, a living testament to resilience and grace. A hush falls over the courthouse steps, so profound it seems to swallow the city noise beyond. Officer Martinez stands rigid, the crowd's gaze burning into his back, the weight of his badge suddenly heavier than ever. Every muscle in his body is poised for resistance. But something in Judge Washington's eyes, deep, unwavering, almost sorrowful, commands stillness. It is a silence charged with anticipation, as if everyone present senses the world is about to tilt on its axis. Judge Washington draws a measured breath, his dignity unshaken by the chaos swirling around him. He looks not at the officer but past him, as if searching for something beyond the moment. Perhaps the memory of every time he's been underestimated, or the echo of every injustice he's witnessed and endured. The crowd leans in, breathless, caught in the gravity of what's about to unfold. With a calm so profound it feels almost unearthly, Judge Washington finally speaks, his voice low but resonant, carrying through the thick air. "Young man," he begins, each word deliberate, "I appreciate your commitment to your duty, but I must inform you, my name is Samuel Washington. I am the presiding judge of this courthouse." The words land like thunder. For a heartbeat, no one moves. The crowd freezes, all those cell phones held aloft, trembling in their owners' hands. A gasp ripples through the onlookers, sharp and collective, as if the whole world has just drawn breath in shock. Martinez's face drains of color. His lips part, but no sound escapes. The authority he clung to so fiercely evaporates in an instant, replaced by a hollow, gnawing disbelief. His mind races to catch up, replaying every word, every gesture. Suddenly, the reality of his mistake is undeniable. Time is slowing down. The judge's revelation hangs in the air, a simple truth that transforms everything. The bystanders, once passive, now radiate a stunned energy, some eyes wide in admiration, others narrowed in anger, all of them witnessing the moment justice shifts. Martinez's hand falls away from his belt, fingers shaking, his posture shrinking as the enormity of his error settles on his shoulders. Judge Washington doesn't gloat. He doesn't raise his voice or demand retribution. Instead, he stands taller, embodying the very grace that comes from a lifetime of choosing principle over pride. "I have spent my life upholding the law," he continues, his gaze steady. "And I know the responsibilities that come with a badge. But those responsibilities do not give us the right to judge before we understand. They do not give us the right to strip another person of their dignity." Martinez swallows hard, his eyes darting between the judge and the crowd. The shame is palpable, but so is the vulnerability. He is exposed, stripped of the armor of authority, forced to confront the consequences of his assumptions. The crowd watches, some with satisfaction, others with empathy, all of them hungry for resolution. There is a catharsis in the air, a collective exhale as the power dynamic reverses. For so long, the tension has built, anger at the injustice, fear for what might happen, hope for something better. Now, in this moment, justice is not just served, it is embodied. The judge's composure becomes a lesson, his words a balm for wounds both seen and unseen. Judge Washington's voice softens, inviting not just Martinez, but everyone listening to reflect. "We all make mistakes," he says, "but we are measured by how we respond to them. True authority is not about asserting power. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even, especially, when it is inconvenient." Martinez lowers his head, the fight gone from his posture. He stammers, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know, sir. The words trail off, insufficient for the moment, but honest in their humility. The judge nods, accepting the apology not as a victory, but as a necessary step toward healing. "Now you do," he replies gently. "And now you have a choice. Will you let this moment make you bitter or better?" The crowd is silent, hanging on every syllable. In the judge's calm, they find vindication. In the officer's discomfort, they see the price of unchecked bias. Yet beneath the surface, something deeper stirs. A recognition that justice is not a static thing, but a living, breathing practice. It demands courage, humility, and the willingness to see beyond appearances. For Martinez, the world narrows to the space between him and the judge. He nods slowly, a silent promise to carry this lesson forward. The crowd begins to disperse, some shaking their heads, others quietly moving, all of them changed by what they witnessed. As the tension melts away, a sense of balance is restored. The judge turns, briefcase in hand, and walks toward the courthouse doors, no longer just an older man waiting to be let inside, but the living embodiment of justice reclaimed. Martinez watches him go, chastened but awakened, left to reckon with the truth that authority, when wielded without wisdom, is nothing more than a hollow badge. In that moment, everyone present becomes a witness not just to a mistake, but to a transformation, a reminder that the most powerful revelations are the ones that force us to confront who we are and who we might yet become. Justice, when it arrives swiftly, rarely feels gentle. Word of the courthouse confrontation spreads with the speed and force of a summer storm, carried by the whispers of bystanders, amplified by the glow of phone screens, and crystallized in the sharp clarity of video evidence. Within hours, the footage is everywhere, looped endlessly on social media, dissected by local news anchors, debated in living rooms and barbershops. The image of Officer Martinez, once the anonymous face of authority, now flickers across screens as the symbol of a deeper, festering wound. The community, long accustomed to swallowing indignities in silence, is no longer content to watch and wait. There's a hunger for accountability, for proof that the system can correct itself. As the story breaks, the Jefferson County Police Department is thrust into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Press conferences are hastily arranged, statements drafted and redrafted, every syllable weighed for its potential to soothe or inflame. The chief of police, gray at the temples and weary from too many sleepless nights, stands before a sea of cameras and admits what so many already know. Mistakes were made, and justice must be served. The announcement comes quickly. Officer Martinez is placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. For some, it's a relief, a sign that the wheels of justice have not rusted shut. For others, it's not enough, not yet. The community's patience, stretched thin by years of broken promises, demands more than procedural gestures. They want real change, not just a scapegoat. Martinez, now isolated from his badge and uniform, faces a reckoning of his own. Alone in his apartment, he replays the encounter in his mind, each moment sharper than the last. Shame and regret swirl together, but so does a strange, unfamiliar clarity, a sense that this moment, painful as it is, might be the beginning of something different. He watches the judge's public statement, and for the first time listens not as an officer, but as a man searching for a way forward. The judge's words, delivered with the same quiet authority that stunned the crowd, resonate far beyond the courthouse steps. Standing before a packed room and a bank of microphones, Judge Washington addresses not only his own experience, but the dignity owed to every person who walks through the doors of justice. Dignity is not a privilege bestowed by power, he declares, his voice unwavering. It is an inalienable right, woven into the fabric of our humanity. No badge, no robe, no title can diminish or elevate it. I hope that what happened here today will serve as a reminder to all of us that respect must be the foundation of every interaction, especially when it is hardest to give. The effect is electric. Community leaders, long frustrated by the slow churn of bureaucracy, seize the moment. They organize forums, town halls, and listening sessions, urging citizens to share their stories and demand better. Faith leaders speak from their pulpits, reminding congregations that justice is not a spectator sport, but a collective responsibility. Students march, holding signs that read, "Dignity for all," and "See me, don't judge me." The courthouse, once a symbol of distant authority, becomes a gathering place for hope and healing. The department, under mounting pressure, moves beyond empty promises. Training protocols are overhauled, with a renewed focus on implicit bias, de-escalation, and the lived experiences of those most often marginalized. Officers are required to listen to community members to hear firsthand the pain and frustration that too frequently go unheard. The process is uncomfortable, sometimes confrontational, but undeniably necessary. For the first time in years, residents feel their voices matter. The balance of power begins to shift, not just in policy, but in spirit. Martinez's suspension is more than a punishment, it is a catalyst. He is invited, not compelled, to attend a community forum. At first he hesitates, wary of facing the very people whose trust he's lost. But something in the judge's words lingers, a quiet challenge he cannot ignore. He sits in the back row, listening as neighbors recount their own hidden struggles, the times they were unseen, unheard, dismissed. The stories are painful, raw, but they are also laced with resilience, with a stubborn belief in the possibility of change. As the meeting ends, a young woman approaches Martinez. Her brother, she explains, was once arrested for fitting a description. She looks him in the eye, not with anger, but with a steady, searching empathy. "We need you to do better," she says quietly. "We need all of you to do better." Martinez nods, words failing him, but something shifts inside. A seed planted. A new identity beginning to take root. Meanwhile, the judge's statement ripples outward. Picked up by national outlets, quoted in op-eds, shared by activists and officials alike. His message is simple, but its impact is profound. The measure of a just society is not how it treats the powerful, but how it honors the dignity of the vulnerable. The public, starved for accountability, finds validation in the swift response. There is satisfaction in seeing the system respond decisively, in watching authority held to account. It restores, if not complete faith, then at least the hope that progress is possible. In the weeks that follow, the courthouse steps become a site of pilgrimage. People leave flowers, handwritten notes, and tokens of gratitude. Some come to protest, others to pray, all united by a desire to witness a turning point. The judge continues his work, not as a hero, but as a steward of something larger than himself, a commitment to justice that transcends any single moment. For the community, the fallout is both sobering and empowering. They have seen what happens when dignity is denied, but also what is possible when it is fiercely defended. The narrative shifts from victimhood to agency, from outrage to action. There is a sense that, for once, the arc of the moral universe has bent, if only slightly, toward justice. And for those who watched the video, who felt the sting of injustice and the relief of resolution, the lesson lingers. Authority, unexamined, can become a weapon. But when it is challenged, when it is made accountable, it can be transformed. The story becomes not just about one officer, one judge, or one community, but about all of us and the choices we make when power is in our hands. In that choice lies the hope for a more just and compassionate world, one where dignity is not a privilege, but a promise kept. Sometimes it's the smallest moments that carry the most significant weight, echoing far beyond their original boundaries. The morning when dignity was tested on the courthouse steps did more than alter the lives of two men. It became a spark, igniting conversations and changes that few could have predicted. As news of the incident spread, it refused to fade quietly into the background. Instead, it became a rallying point, a story retold in classrooms, community forums, and legislative chambers, each time gaining new meaning and momentum. Within weeks, the video of that tense encounter had reached not just neighboring towns, but the entire state. The rawness of the footage, the emotion in every voice and gesture, became impossible to ignore. Lawmakers, pressed by constituents and inspired by Judge Washington's unwavering composure, began to act. A bipartisan coalition emerged, drafting sweeping reforms aimed at rebuilding trust and ensuring accountability. New training requirements were introduced statewide, focusing not just on the mechanics of policing, but on the art of listening, the value of restraint, and the transformative power of empathy. These weren't just boxes to be checked. They were a call to reshape the very foundation of law enforcement culture. Recruits now watched the courthouse video as part of their induction. Not to shame, but to learn. Instructors paused the footage at key moments, asking future officers, "What do you see? What do you feel? What would you do differently?" The lesson was clear. Authority, left unchecked, can become a barrier. But when paired with humility, it can be a bridge. The story of Officer Martinez and Judge Washington became a living case study, a reminder that every uniformed encounter is a crossroads where respect and injustice wrestle for dominance. The reforms didn't stop at the academy doors. Departments across the state adopted new policies, mandatory body cameras, real-time reporting of use of force incidents, and independent oversight boards with teeth, not just titles. Community leaders were invited to participate in policy reviews, their voices shaping the rules that would govern future interactions. For the first time in memory, residents felt seen and heard, their experiences woven into the fabric of public safety. Judge Washington, once a reluctant figure in the spotlight, embraced his new role with quiet determination. He traveled to towns large and small, speaking not just about what had happened, but about what could happen when people chose courage over comfort. His message was simple yet profound. Dignity is not a gift you give. It's a right you recognize. He met with police chiefs, city council members, and high school students, urging each to see themselves as agents of change. Through his advocacy, mentorship programs blossomed, pairing young people with officers in honest, sometimes difficult conversations about fear, hope, and the future they wanted to build together. The impact of his work rippled outward. School districts integrated lessons on empathy and conflict resolution into their curricula, teaching children that leadership is measured not by how loudly you speak, but by how intently you listen. Businesses revised their hiring and training practices, determined to root out bias and foster belonging. Faith communities opened their doors for dialogues on reconciliation, healing old wounds with a new understanding. The incident on the courthouse steps became shorthand for a turning point, a moment when a community decided to face its shadows and walk toward the light together. Officer Martinez, too, found himself changed. His suspension was not just a pause, but a reckoning. He attended community meetings, sometimes facing anger, sometimes receiving forgiveness, always listening. The stories he heard of humiliation, fear, and resilience became a mirror, forcing him to confront the gap between intention and impact. When he returned to duty, he did so with humility, determined to be the kind of officer who could be trusted to listen before acting. His colleagues noticed the difference, and over time, many followed his lead, choosing connection over control. The courthouse itself, once the backdrop for confrontation, became a symbol of possibility. A plaque was installed by the entrance, engraved with Judge Washington's words about dignity and respect. Visitors paused to reflect, some leaving notes of gratitude, others simply sitting in quiet contemplation. The steps where tension once simmered now hosted community events, celebrations of progress, and moments of shared joy. The transformation was both physical and spiritual, a testament to what's possible when people refuse to accept the status quo. But the most enduring change was not written into law or etched in stone. It lived in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed, participated, and learned. The story spread across social media, sparking difficult but necessary conversations about race, authority, and the meaning of justice. For some, it was a validation of pain long endured. For others, a challenge to see the world through different eyes. The narrative shifted from outrage to action, from despair to hope. People began to ask themselves hard questions. How do I use my own power? When have I judged too quickly? What can I do in my own life to choose respect over assumption? Judge Washington's advocacy extended beyond policing. He worked with educators to develop lesson plans on empathy and critical thinking, with business leaders to create more inclusive workplaces, and with faith communities to foster reconciliation. His approach was always the same: patient, persistent, and grounded in the belief that change is possible when people are willing to do the work. He reminded everyone that leadership is not about titles, but about the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Years later, researchers would look back at the incident and its aftermath, noting a remarkable shift. Communities that implemented the new training and policies saw a measurable decrease in complaints and a gradual restoration of trust. Crime rates dropped, not through harsher enforcement, but through genuine partnership between police and residents. The courthouse steps became a model for other cities, proof that transformation is possible when people choose to act with courage and compassion. The legacy of that morning is not confined to one town, one department, or one judge. It lives on in every officer who pauses before making a judgment, in every community member who speaks up for dignity, in every child who learns that respect is not negotiable. The story serves as a living reminder that real change is not a solitary act, but a collective journey, one that requires honesty, humility, and hope. So, as we reflect on this journey from confrontation to transformation, the question becomes, what will you do with your moment? When you find yourself at a crossroads, whether in a position of authority or simply as a witness to someone else's struggle, will you choose comfort or will you choose courage? Will you reinforce the old patterns or help build something better? The answer ultimately belongs to each of us. The story of Judge Washington and Officer Martinez is not just about justice served or lessons learned. It is about the enduring power of humility, the necessity of respect, and the promise of systemic change. It is a call to action, a reminder that even the smallest act of dignity can ripple outward, creating waves of hope that reach farther than we ever imagined. In that promise lies the blueprint for a future where justice is not an aspiration, but a reality we create together, one choice at a time.